Travels with Dottie here. And, most people think aging involves decline in memory, cognition, less sharp, but that's not necessarily true. There's specific abilities that are pretty neat that happen after age 60. They're way more important than remembering where you put your keys or why you walked into that room. Well, here I am as promised to talk about the topic of what really gets better. Does anything get better in your brain, in your cognitive functioning as you age past 60? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. And before I get into it, I want to say this. You often will hear me warn people about getting information from social media, including YouTube, and listening to guys like me that sound like they know what they're talking about and take away what they say as fact. Don't do that, right? So to shore up this particular talk, if you go in my description, you will see a detailed list of peer-reviewed scientific studies that back up the things that I'm saying here. All right. There's this thing called crystallized intelligence. Doesn't that sound really cool? What improves in crystallized intelligence is vocabulary, verbal knowledge, and pattern recognition across life contexts. That's general world knowledge and semantic memory. Crystallized intelligence, that stuff relies on the experiences that you have over your lifetime. Long-term memory networks, especially involving your left temporal lobe and inferior parietal regions, fancy names for parts of the brain. Because what fails us is are not these parts of the brain. We will talk about the things that we all know about, and some of us constantly joke about the declines, and they're present. This crystallized intelligence peaks in your 60s and 70s. So if you're between 60 and 80, let's say 60 and 85, you are in your prime for crystallized intelligence. And it's valuable stuff. I mean, strategic decisions in businesses, complex decision making, all rely on crystallized intelligence. And no matter how smart the young people are and how much knowledge and memory, short-term memory capacity they have and education, they cannot replicate the experiences that we have over a lifetime. In fact, you can't derive that experience, but you can't learn about history in a crystallized intelligence functional way just by reading about it, right? Living it is something different. It becomes part of your wiring, right? It's important. Research shows, I'm just going to read the things technically that I have in my notes here. So forgive me if I lose eye contact to look at the notes. Research shows reduced amygdala reactivity to negative stimuli, greater prefrontal cortex regulation, increased positive bias. So it means older adults recover faster from emotional stress. They show lower baseline reactivity and report higher life satisfaction on average. This is known as the positivity effect in aging. And I'm gonna go off a little bit and talk about my thoughts about this. I've been thinking about this quite a bit. You have a lifetime of setbacks and disappointments and heartache over and over again over decades. And you realize, I have a long history of getting over these things. These things do pass. And the longer you live, the more that settles into you that although it may feel awful in the moment, there's a path through it. And you become confident with that. So your reactivity is your resilience becomes better. You recover faster from emotional stress because you know it's not the big deal that it certainly would have been when you were 30 or 40 or even 50. And here's the other thing that the research didn't talk about, but I'm going to talk about being dead, death. Okay? How we think about death in life, I think. Um, I'm stepping out on the edge here because I'm talking as if I know about everyone, and I don't. I only know about me, and I know what makes sense. So if it makes sense to you, we're on the same page. If not, this isn't something you're going to find in any of those studies in the description. You think about death as something far off or something far-fetched. When we're 18, we know that every once in a while an 18-year-old will, some kid we know in high school was in a car accident and he died. And that's terrible, but we don't personalize it to there's some high probability that's going to happen to me. Is in your younger years as you live, the deaths at your age become a lower priority event, right? But that starts to gradually change as you get over. And I noticed there was an inflection point at 60 because every day just about there'd be so and so an actor died, and I'd go, how old were they? I go, tell me they were a lot older than me. And you start seeing people dying at your age or even younger. And the more regularly you see that, the more you realize there's a much higher probability these days. And the process is gradual, but the realization is pretty sudden. At least it was for me that, oh my gosh, I suddenly have significant odds of dying this year. So we have a shift in how we think about dying. It goes from something far off to something that potentially is fairly immediate. Right? When we're 20 years old, we figure, hey, if I live to 85, that's so far in the future, I can't even really conceive of what that distance in years looks or feels like. I'm not worried about it. So when you're 60, 65, and you look at the, average life expectancy for a male, I think it's something like 77 years or something. It's not that far off. You go, I remember my father when I think he was 79. He said, I think I have about 5 years left. Not in a sad or scary way, just a matter of fact, I thought about it and I think 5 years is a good round number. And he died 4 years later. Um, and uh, part of my personal journey about death concerns being with my father, my brothers and sisters when he died, and having that experience, and also being a paramedic and being in the presence of death quite a bit. Um, the attitude goes more. Well, I think it starts with there's some fear and concern, right? At this age, there's a mixture of two things. This is fascinating. And I can give you an example of one is that more than once I've gone to bed at night. I've got myself and my dog Dottie and George the cat, and I go and I shut the lights off and I lock the door in the trailer. As irrational as this may seem, many times I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't lock it in case I die overnight. I want them to find me. Why? Because I don't want my dog and cat to starve or suffer. That's something that doesn't cross a 30-year-old man's mind. It is something that crosses so there's some fear in that. There were a couple of instances of people I know of that died in their sleep in supposedly good health, but they had a heart attack in their sleep. They had a cardiovascular condition they weren't even aware of. Um, I think about that as could I die at 66? Well, Yeah. So there's the fear part. The other part is you like almost all fear, you start to move slowly into acceptance. That, the chances are I'm going to live through this year or next year. I look at the longevity of my parents and grandparents, and all things being equal, um, I will. The probabilities are I will live into my 90s, but there's no guarantee of that. Anything could happen. Certainly, every year that goes by, the probability of dying increases. In fact, I had a few minutes ago, I stopped the recording and I went and ran some numbers and found the pattern of by age, what percent of people at that age die. And I started at 66, it's 1.9%. So 2 out of every 100 people that are 66 years old die that year. And as you can anticipate, it starts ratcheting up. I want to talk about the acceptance part, where you're at peace with the fact that most of my life is over, right? And so things that had less value in the past start taking on more value, and things that had high value in the past take on a lower value in general. I'm talking for me, but many people feel the way I do. Maybe you do. I value money less. I value time much more. Right? I value freedom and i.e., the ability to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I value that more than I used to. I am less willing to trade my freedom and time for money or possessions. I'm just not. The net effect of all that is I feel happier now at 66 than I have my entire life, right? And it's cognitive, right? I'm physically probably, by many measures, less comfortable than I've been in prior years because the discomfort increases with age. And there are ways to stave that off: strength training, supplements, whatever, good diet. But your body really starts to break down. You're not as flexible and pain free as you were when you're 18. It's not going to happen. But I'm way happier than I was at 18. Way happier than 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. In my 60s, when I reached that age of retirement, and these things, my values shifted. And also I value personal relationships much more than I used to. Right. And combine that with, I worry less. I worry less as every day goes on. I worry less and less about death and accept it. Right. So let me go back to my regular notes here. And I was just, the bullet point I was on is older people report higher life satisfaction on average. And I think what I just said were the reasons for that. I listed 3 areas of the brain involved, and I can't even pronounce most of them. So forget it. Who cares? But pattern recognition, let's talk about that. That's the one that really got me onto this topic is, working memory declines working memory declines. Working memory means, where are my keys? What did I do with that thing? Why did I walk into the kitchen? That's working memory. That declines. It just does. However, the ability to detect long-term patterns, integrate across domains, and use heuristics efficiently often improves. And let's talk about what that means. And when I first started talking about this phenomenon in pattern recognition, a couple of people chimed in in the comments and said, that's called wisdom, Rob. And I think that's accurate. It's called wisdom related cognition. Older adults rely more on distributed sort of neural networks and associative processing. Fancy way for, we store different kinds of memories and cognitions in different parts of our brain. Emotional memories and short-term memories, long-term memories, sensory memories, all kinds of things occur in different parts of our brain. And our brain gets better on integrating those bits of information in a lot like where they describe how artificial intelligence is able to do that. Well, we're way ahead of artificial intelligence, right? We are. Is people talk about, oh, the singularity. That's when artificial intelligence becomes as good as our brains at synthesizing that diverse information. All right. And we're not there yet. So you're still smarter than AI. There's some efficiencies in healthy aging. Internal reflection remains strong. Autobiographical memory the depth often increases. And in a lot of ways, the past becomes clearer. Memories of the long past become clearer. You can see this in Alzheimer's patients. At a certain stage, will be able to talk in detail about something that happened 30 years ago, but may not be able to tell you what happened 20 minutes ago or what they had for breakfast. So this internal reflection, autobiographical memory, and pattern recognition all combine to meaning making improves. What's meaning making? You know, we talk about what's the meaning in life. Well, the meaning in life is it's not something that exists out there in life. It exists up here. The meaning that you make of things, what you think things mean, I find it to be an important part of the feelings that I'm describing, where I have more positive life satisfaction now than I ever did before at this age. Pain tolerance. I bet you didn't know about this one. I didn't know about this one, but I thought about it and I realized it was right. There's an increased pain threshold and slower pain signaling. Chronic pain risk increases. Acute pain sensitivity can decrease. There's things that happen that I expect to hurt a lot, and they don't. You know, whacking my thumb with a hammer. I can remember doing that when I was 20, and I almost passed out. I can do it now, and it hurts, but I'm a little surprised that it's not as bad as I remembered it. And we developed, as we age, a tolerance to that pain, and to me, that's okay, but it's more than offset by that increased chronic pain. I'd rather have on the thumb once than that chronic long-term pain. But those are the cards that we're dealt when we're getting over. Immune system. There are actually improvements that happen in the immune system. Certain innate immune responses stabilize. Autoimmune activity decreases later in life. Allergic reactivity may lessen. Now, that last one I haven't experienced because I'm not allergic to anything, but I understand that it happens in people that have severe allergic reactions to substances like peanuts or something that could attenuate or potentially almost disappear later in life. I've noticed this with, I'm not a doctor. I just play one on YouTube. I'm kidding, but this is not science. I got put a big thing up here. Not science. Rob's opinion that's based on not much, but what I believe. My personal experience about getting sick. And I get sick probably 3 times a year. And I believe that it's the common cold every time it hits me. So here's what typically happens. In the middle of the night, typically I will wake up and I'll be shivering. I can't, no matter how much I crank up the heat, I'm shivering. Well, that's an immune response. That is my body raising my internal temperature to the beginning stages of activating my immune system to fight off an infection. Once that shivering stage passes, I feel some fatigue, and then within about 10, 12 hours, I'm back to normal. In other words, my immune system beat back something and I didn't get sick. And usually the worst that's been happening is something that process happened last Sunday, like clockwork. It had been probably 3 or 4 months since it happened. It's happening. And instead of that quick recovery, when I'm shivering, I'm taking my temperature. It's like 97.8. And after the shivering stopped, and I felt the fatigue, but I felt worse than usual. I took my temperature. That temperature, and I kept monitoring it, went up to about 100. I think it was 100.7 was the highest it went. And I ran that temperature and was sick until the next morning where, boom, it was defeated. So that wasn't my pattern as an adult. I'd get a cold and it would hang on for 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, maybe a little longer. That doesn't happen to me anymore. So I believe, and underline, Rob believes, doesn't mean it's true. Sorry about the chiming. You can't really stop that, can you? Yeah, you can, but you have to think to stop it. I believe that's my immune system getting better. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. That was just a message from my good friend Jack in Eagle Nest, which I'll be up there hanging out with him and in Eagle Nest, New Mexico. I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, next topic is stress reactivity. It's a big one. It really is a big one. Cortisol baselines may rise slightly, but acute stress spikes are often less dramatic. And I think that's back to what I said about, hey, I've played this song before. I've been through this traumatic stuff before, and I've been all right so far. And it sucks now, but it's going to be better pretty soon. That is going to blunt the peaks of those stress reactions. Therefore, with that, your sympathetic nervous system reactivity decreases. So all that means is I'm not automatically, when something bad happens, going to that intense fight or flight response. It doesn't reach to that level as often. And there's, again, a faster recovery from that, a faster emotional recovery, because you've got that network of different types of memory going. It's that those networks are connecting together, and you need no effort to do this. It happens automatically. And it takes that, it's got the pattern recognition, says, I've seen this before. I know what the results look like. It's going to be okay. It's a very reassuring thing to your emotions, to your nervous system. It's good stuff. Okay. So I can't, in good conscience, talk about all the things that improve and not even just touch on the things that obviously don't and acknowledge them. Processing speed in the brain declines. Working memory, where were my car keys? Reaction time, just physical reaction time is just, it's not there. You don't want an 80-year-old out there working as a cop, right? The reaction time is not there. Muscle mass decreases. Yeah, it does. There used to be something there. I swear there was something there that you might have gone, do you work out? Stop it. People don't ask me anymore, do you work out? It's not a question. VO2 max decreases, meaning just the efficiency of breathing. So, you get out of breath easier. So just to summarize, older adults show greater neural efficiency in well-practiced domains, reduced emotional volatility, increased meaning-oriented cognition, figuring out what stuff means, high-level above the clouds, thinking about things that happen in life. More stable identity structure. I feel more confident about who I am, what I stand for, what my values are, who I'm being in the world, and enhanced social reasoning. I can better navigate social situations now because of all that stuff happening at once, and all that pattern recognition um, is helping me in that regard. Um, that's why the measures of life satisfaction peak in the 60s and 70s. Isn't that great? Um, so after 60, you lose speed, you lose problem solving agility, but you gain depth, regulation, pattern integration, perspective, and emotional calibration. Um, novel problem solving ability that's requiring on retrieve that what it means is retrieval of short-term memories, that kind of problem solving. But problem solving is the strategic thinking that involves seeing the big picture and the dynamics of diverse working parts that improves. Okay. Um, uh, in many complex real world tasks, the gains that you get compensate for the losses. So, you know, a thing that I think many think is that while older people aren't as valuable in the workplace, and that's widely believed. And one of the reasons things are widely believed are one, they're either true or there's very significant elements of truth in the statement. And there are elements of truth in the statement that there are jobs that I used to do that I would not be as good at, right? Ones that require that kind of novel problem solving agility. But there were other jobs in those organizations I would excel at, right? In big corporations that I've been, there's always been planning and development and research. Those kinds of things that require the kinds of thinking that I'm talking about are uh, that fit really nicely with um, those of us over 60. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you see how it relates to my basic topics of being retired. Specifically, I don't think this matters whether you're being retired on the road or not, but I'd say 90% of the stuff I talk about applies to whether you're sitting in your RV in the desert right now or sitting on a couch in northern Minnesota. Watching the air temperature outside and being grateful that you're inside watching Travels with Dottie. I think most apply to both. And I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and thanks for watching. If you watched all the way to here, you're the best. Thank you.